Many of you will have been at the lecture last week, but for those who weren't there, I just remind you a little bit about dear Necati. He is a research associate at the University of Bamberg in Germany, and he specializes in late Ottoman history. He's the author of an excellent book, in case you haven't seen it, on descent and heterodoxy in the late Ottoman Empire, and a more recent publication, which I don't have to be able to show you on the camera, but I understand it's about non-Sunni Muslims in the late Ottoman Empire, so no doubt also excellent. Today, he will be giving us the second of two lectures, following on from the previous session, and we look forward to hearing from you, dear Necati. Before we go over to you, I also want to remind everyone that this is in fact the last formal lecture of the course. We have one final session in 2 weeks' time on the 30th of May, to which you are all encouraged to attend. We've also asked, if possible, for all the lecturers who have participated in the course so far to be present, and we will have the opportunity to discuss together some various questions with them. We look forward to learning what those questions are, and we'll tell you a little bit more about the structure of that panel in the coming days. So once again, welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for offering us this session, Necati, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. Thank you, everyone. I welcome you all and appreciate your interest. I am afraid I packed too much information, but so bear with me. I hope it's not too much. So last time I was talking about the official Ottoman attitude towards the Wahhabis and Baha'is in the empire, also with relations to Iran, with this triangle relationship between Iran, the Ottomans, and the Wahhabis and Baha'is. And today I will more concentrate on relations of Baha and Abdu'l with Ottoman reformers. And for this, I would like to share my screen with you with the PowerPoint. I hope you can see it. All right. So, in the reading material Ethan sent a few days ago, there are some points to which I will not refer today. But today I want to go further and see what other relationships Abdu'l had with Ottoman reformers in the latest Ottoman period, if you will. In general, we can say that Baha and Abdu'l, who was known as Abbas Effendi in the Ottoman Empire, they were both in contact with Ottoman, of course, statesmen, low and high, and also with the reformers from roughly the 1860s onwards. And Baha'u'llah, with the claim to a new religious dispensation, called himself a world reformer, in fact, and composed many writings stressing not only the spiritual regeneration and advancement of humanity, but also material progress. In the words of a historian, Baha'u'llah repeatedly linked teleastic concerns with democratic themes, showing the way in which he saw his appearance as a world messiah to have turned the world upside down. The genesis of the Baha'i faith was in a time, as we know, of crucial global religious and political changes in the 19th century. And of course, the Ottoman Empire also underwent changes since the 18th century and also did some crucial steps to modernize the empire, if you will. So roughly, if we look at the late Ottoman period, at the reform period, we can say that from 1789, which is also the year of the French Revolution, Sultan Selim III started military reforms in the Ottoman Empire in order to keep up with the European powers who were now more powerful than the Ottoman Empire. So the Ottomans were behind, and they tried to modernize the army, and also for this called European advisors, especially French advisors to the Ottoman Empire, and tried to rejuvenate the Ottoman army The steps taken by Selim III were more or less unsuccessful, but after he died, his nephew Mahmud II, who then was Sultan, he paved the way actually for later reforms, very important reforms, which in essence were a centralization of the state, of the Ottoman state, which was decentralized since the 18th century because of many powerful local governors who challenged actually the authority in Istanbul. And for this, Mahmud II centralized with very radical steps the Ottoman state again. And what he basically did was he eliminated powerful opponents. He didn't want any opposition to his reforms, and so he eliminated or silenced those powerful regional authorities or governors. And most importantly, in 1826, he eliminated the powerful Janissary corps, actually, the Janissary soldiers, the military, which was the part of the Ottoman military. So, but they, in the official Ottoman view, they were rebellious. They have been rebellious for a long time. So Mahmud II basically eliminated those and surrounded himself with like-minded officials. Then we have from 1839 the Tanzimat, or reorganization period of the Ottoman Empire, which included extensive reforms in all spheres of society, of the state, and these were announced by Sultan Abdul-Majid in 1839 and continued by Sultan Abdul-Aziz until 1876. And 1876 is a very crucial year for the late Ottoman period because of the deposition and death of Sultan Abdul-Aziz. He was most probably killed or committed suicide. In any case, then followed 3 months of ineffective interregnum of Murad V, who later also was declared a lunatic. But during that time, some powerful pashas speak, especially Mithat Pasha, about who I will speak later. He was looking for an able follower to the Ottoman throne, and he found it in Prince Abdul Hamid, who seemed to be very liberal and open to the idea of a constitutional regime. And so he was installed as a sultan in 1876 as Sultan Abdul Hamid II. And this era, roughly, in which he ruled, is called the first constitutional era. It was a constitutional monarchy, and also a parliament was set up in 1877, but then dissolved by Abdul Hamid, who ruled then alone for about 33 years. Then we have the 1908 revolution, who were basically intellectuals or a range of different groups under the umbrella of the Young Turk movement, from military men to intellectuals to religious people to officials who challenged the reign of Abdul Hamid because they thought there was too much pressure on the people, everything was censored. And so in 1908, the Young Turk Revolution broke out. It reinstalled the Constitution of 1876 and the parliament. And this era is then called the Second Constitutional Era until roughly 1920. So from 1908 until 1918, we have the Young Turk rule. So it's and until the end of World War I. And in the beginning, everyone had high hopes in the Young Turk Revolution. There was a euphoria about brotherhood, about freedom, about liberty, but which was unfortunately frustrated in 1913, and after which a dictatorial rule was dominant in the late Ottoman Empire. And as we know, in 1918, the Ottoman lost World War I together with Germany. So just basically to give you an idea very briefly about the Tanzimat period, which is important, I think, understand also some key points in the reformist ideas of the Baha'i faith. So the first edict, the Tanzimat edict, was announced in 1839 by Sultan Abdu'l. It was basically about guaranteeing and securing the safety of the life. It was about honor and property of all the subjects, conscription into the army, a new conscription system, and the limitation of military service. There were provincial cabinets set up, including leaders of Muslim and non-Muslim communities. So it was a very well intended step towards reforming the empire, but I think it's not wrong to say that most of the reforms were not really realized. And for that reason, a second edict was announced in 1856, this time under pressure by especially Great Britain, also by other European powers who more and more interfered in Ottoman internal politics, and because they thought that as they called it, the sick man at the Bosporus needed some help. So in any case, the second edict reiterated the equality of all Ottoman subjects, regardless of their religion. So it wanted equality of Muslims and all non-Muslims, especially Christians, because the Europeans emphasized that the Ottomans would not, treat the Christians in a good way. So this edict really tried to bring Christians and non-Muslims to a level in society. And in some regard, the Christians had then more advantages over than the Muslims had, which of course outraged also the Muslims in Ottoman society. There were many other political and social reforms which paved the way for the first Ottoman constitution. And the Tanzimat reforms continued under the leadership of course, Sultan Abdulaziz, but he more or less was in the background, and we can speak of in this period of Abdulaziz, we can actually speak of rule of the bureaucracy, especially two pashas who are known in Baha history, Fuad Pasha and Ali Pasha, were the leaders of the Tanzimat, and they exchanged also offices as prime and foreign minister. So what also happened is that new provinces were set up during the Tanzimat, consultative councils were set up. The public education was modeled after the French model. There were many other like technological advances. There was the first civil code, and Abdulaziz was actually the first sultan to ever go to Western Europe in 1867, where he met Napoleon III and Victoria, both of whom Baha'u'llah also addressed in tablets. We have an expensive modernization of the Navy, which caused financial difficulties combined with natural disasters and new palaces. And all these expenses and actually waste of money, of which Abdulaziz was accused by some ministers, led to the announcement of the Ottoman public debt in 1875. And for this reason, actually, because Sultan Abdulaziz was seen as not able to rule the affairs, he was deposed by Mithat Pasha and some affiliates. And he, as I said, he was most probably killed in one of the palaces. During the Tanzimat, we also have an anti-Tanzimat movement, if you will, of some young Ottoman intellectuals, mostly state officers, who opposed the top-down state reforms. And this movement called the Young Ottomans, they were against the superficial reforms and westernization of Ali and Fuad Pasha. And initially Mustafa Reshid Pasha, who was the teacher of the both, actually, these three pashas were very elitist, autocratic, and they favored the bureaucratic oligarchy. So they thought that the rule of a few able ministers was enough for the empire, and they were against actually the constitutional regime. They even limited the sultan's power. Along with the reforms that were based on Western ideals and laws, the Sharia, the Islamic Sharia, was less important for these two pashas. I mean, there were still Sharia courts, but more and more civil courts modeled after the European model were in the Ottoman Empire, were set up. And the Young Ottoman movement, they wanted actually not only superficial imitation of the West, but they wanted a synthesis of Islam and the West, as they said. So they claimed that there were always like Quranic or Islamic roots for parliament, for constitution or for consultation, and that one should only go back and see how these Islamic ideas also influenced European ideas. After Ali and Fuad Pasha died, the Young Ottomans realized at least one of their goals. They announced the constitution, as I said, in 1876, and the parliament was set up in 1877 with the representatives of ethnic and religious groups, all sorts of ethnic and religious groups. And the Young Ottomans also favored or propagated an ideology that they called Ottomanism, that included everyone in the Ottoman Empire, and that should prevent nationalisms in the Ottoman Empire, because since the early 19th century, Greece and Bulgaria and other provinces in the Balkans were influenced by nationalisms coming from Western Europe, and in order to avoid the demise of the empire, they tried to propagate this idea of Ottomanism, but it failed. We have Mithat Pasha, as I said, he was the patron of the Young Ottomans in the 1870s. Mithat Pasha was a very able Ottoman statesman of the 19th century, even admired in Europe. He was a very successful province governor, for example, in Baghdad or in the Balkans. Later, he was also appointed Governor General of Syria. He was twice prime minister for short periods in 1872 and 1876 to 1877, exactly when the constitution was announced and the parliament set up. And he was called the father of the liberals and father of the Ottoman constitution. And this constitution again reiterated some of the earlier edicts with equal rights for all citizens without distinction of race or creed, independent judiciary based on civil rather than religious law, modeled after the French law, universal elementary education. There was to be set up a bicameral parliament, a senate appointed by the Sultan, and so on. And but as I said, internal financial and diplomatic crises around 1875-76 provided Mithat a chance to introduce the constitution. And so he was basically responsible for the deposition of the death of Abdulaziz. And as I said, he favored Prince Abdul Hamid, and who became Sultan. But Abdul Hamid was clever enough to include the notorious Article 113, which gives the Sultan the power to banish anyone from the empire without trial or other legal procedure. And with this, actually, Mithat Pasha sealed his fate. He was later accused of the death of Abdulaziz, and then exiled to Syria, and then called back to Istanbul, where he was tried and then sent to the Arabian Peninsula, to Taif, where he was in jail, and at some point he was strangled in his prison cell. He was killed, and the historians are actually most of the historians think that Abdul Hamid was behind this death of Mithat Pasha. In any case, so as I said, he got rid of Mithat Pasha, and slowly Abdul Hamid II, he set up a very tight and vast spy network and censored everything which was against him. And nevertheless, we cannot say that modernization stopped in the Ottoman Empire. On the contrary, far-reaching modernization and reforms, especially in education, advanced. There were secular Ottoman schools to counter foreign missionary influence. And Abdul Hamid utilized pan-Islamism as state ideology for the unity of all Muslims, also outside the Ottoman Empire, to infuse an Ottoman, or rather Islamic, identity and morality. And he aimed at civilizing nominal Muslims in the hinterland and unruly non-Sunni peoples and converting them to Hanafi Sunnism. But despite all these reforms in the Ottoman Empire during his reign, the Ottomans lost many territories, especially in the Balkans. So then we have the second generation of reformers called the Young Turks. They roughly were set up as a secret society in 1889, and owing to these were in the beginning a few intellectuals, actually all from the medical school in Istanbul, who were against the injustices and repressions during the reign of Abdul Hamid. And they were a secret Masonic and anti-religious actually movement. They favored the positivist worldview, saying that the Ottoman Empire should advance not religiously but scientifically. In any case, the Young Turks, as I said, formed in 1889. First as an intellectual movement, became more political, because many groups joined the Young Turk movement. As I said, there were liberals, there were monarchists, there were military people, nationalists later. So it was an umbrella for all diverse movement. And their common enemy was Sultan Abdul Hamid II. So they organized this revolution in 1908 against the dictator, as they said, and reestablished the regime and the constitution. And the Young Turks were, the ideas were actually, as I said, they favored positivism and scientific ideas, and also many French revolutionary ideas. So when you see like postcards from that period, you have all over like the French Revolution slogans: equality, freedom, and brotherhood. And but what began as a hopeful revolution was then frustrated, as I said, in 1913 by a coup d'etat by three pashas, about whom I will also speak later, and especially about Jamal Pasha. Let me see, this doesn't move. Yeah, here you can see a lithograph celebrating the end of the revolution and the three pashas who took over as dictators. Now coming to the Baha'i faith and its relations with Ottoman reformers, Baha'u'llah had, as we know, good as well as bad relations with Ottoman officials, especially in Istanbul. And regarding Istanbul, he observed that nothing has been seen from its, say, Istanbul's inhabitants, but conventional officious formalities. And with regard to the statesmen in Istanbul, he stated that they were not mature enough. And he says that its governors and elders as children gathered about and disporting themselves with clay, so playing like children. He heavily criticized Ali and Fuad Pasha in the Lohi Rais, Sure Rais, and the Lohi Fuad. And also in one tablet, which is unfortunately lost, which he wrote and addressed to Abdu'l Aziz in Istanbul. His criticism, Baha'u'llah's criticism, is similar to that of the young Ottomans. It was against autocratic rule, injustice, arrogance, and carelessness towards the people. Despite the injustice by Abdu'l Aziz, Baha'u'llah presents himself as his advisor in many tablets, especially in the Surat al-Muluk. He urges the Sultan to follow the commandments of God, act impartially for his subjects, and not to allow anybody to oppress them, to be just king, after the Islamic model, actually. He says in one of the tablets in the Surah, render thanks unto God for having chosen thee out of the whole world and made thee king over them that profess thy faith. Beware lest thou aggrandize thy ministers at the expense of thy subjects. Fear the size of the poor and of the upright in light, and be unto them a benignant sovereign. Thou art God's shadow on earth. Strive therefore to act in such a manner as befitted so eminent, so august a station. So Baha'u'llah advised the Sultan not to leave the affairs of state to the hand of others, especially not to rely on ministers who are not worthy of his trust, but on ministers who are upright and just. And he says that he should take counsel with them in state affairs. And this is an Islamic and Quranic idea, actually, which Baha'u'llah again picks up. So he, along with the young Ottoman, actually, he shows the necessity of consultation in human affairs, government, and consultation was a common terminology with the young Ottoman and Iranian reformers, and in the 19th century, actually, a code word for parliament, implying democracy. And in the Baha'i faith, as you may know, consultation is the key for solving problems in society and the foundation of Baha'i administration. So Baha'u'llah stigmatized, owing to his unjust treatment by Sultan Abdu'l Aziz, the Ottoman Empire as being the throne of tyranny, from where one could hear the hooting of the owl. Despite his criticism of Ottoman rule in unpublished tablets from the late Aqqa period, Baha'u'llah praises Sultan Abdul Hamid II for his just reign and efforts at reforming the Ottoman Empire. In one tablet, he says, this wronged one, so Baha'u'llah bear
I'm not the only one losing Necati, right?
I can't hear him.
Yeah, he's
Frozen.
He's frozen. Yes. Hopefully, we'll be able to reconnect soon.
Recording stopped.
Yes, it will try to reconnect.
Is it possible to text him? Perhaps he doesn't know that he has frozen.
Yeah, we disconnected from the meeting, so he does know. I hope he doesn't have any connection issues.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I take the liberty to I've sent to you in the chat a drawing, a portrait of Fuad Pasha done by Marcel Proust, which I find nice and interesting. So you can take a look at this.
Who made the drawing, Sivan?
Marcel Proust, the author, the French author. I think maybe I even have some more information. Just give me a second and I'll take a look. It's from Yale. I'll send you the information as well. Just a second.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, the connection was gone. I'm really sorry.
Everything's fine.
So tell me where where you heard me last. Let me see. Very sorry. So, can you tell me where I stopped? Was it Abdu'l?
Maybe this. Sorry, the one before that, perhaps.
Yes, one before prior to that.
Yeah,
this one, or Abdu'l Hamid?
Even before that.
Very sorry.
Right there. No, more.
This
No,
one?
Go forward. Yes, here.
This one, okay. Okay, sorry.
Reinitiating the recording.
Really sorry.
Recording in progress.
Okay, so okay, so I hope the connection will be safe now. Let me see. So Baha'u'llah, despite the injustices committed by Abdul Aziz to him and his followers, he presents himself as his advisor. He, especially in the Surah Al-Muluk, he urged the Sultan to follow the commandments of God and act impartially towards his subjects, and not to allow anybody to oppress them, and to be just king. And here he picks up the Islamic model of God's shadow on earth. Render thanks unto God for having chosen thee out of the whole world and made thee king over them that profess thy faith. Beware lest thou aggrandize thy ministers at the expense of thy subjects. Hear the sighs of the poor and of the upright in heart, who at every break of day bewail their plight, and be unto them a benign and solving. Thou art God's shadow on earth. Strive therefore to act in such a manner as befitted so eminent, so august a station. So basically, Baha'u'llah tells the Sultan also in that tablet not to leave the affairs of state to the hand of unreliable ministers, but on ministers who are upright and just. He advises the Sultan to take counsel with them in state affairs, and he actually talks here about the necessity of consultation in human affairs in general, specifically in the government, which is a Quranic Islamic notion. And consultation was a common terminology of Ottoman and Iranian reformers in the 19th century, and the code word for parliament in the Middle East, implying democracy. And it has another connotation in the Baha'i faith, of course, being the foundation of Baha'i administration. Despite his criticism of Ottoman rule in unpublished tablets from the late Akka period, Baha'u'llah praises Sultan Abdul Hamid II for his just reign and efforts at reforming the Ottoman Empire. In one tablet, Baha'u'llah says, "This wronged one beareth witness that the Sultan by name of Abdul Hamid held fast unto the court of justice and fairness and renounced tyranny and iniquity." Baha'u'llah praises Abdul Hamid because he established himself on the seat of consultation and takes counsel at all times with the ministers and the learned ones regarding the affairs of the state. He desires that which the people have desired and possesses a clear vision and a penetrating bright intelligence. Baha'u'llah adds that nothing proceeded from the Sultan which has caused him sadness. In another unpublished tablet, Persian tablet addressed to Sultan Abdul Hamid, Baha'u'llah prays that God may protect him from evils and commends him for being occupied day and night personally with the reformation of the affairs of the subjects and the empire. Here also Baha'u'llah praises the Sultan for resorting to consultation in all matters. In this tablet, Baha'u'llah repeatedly lauds him for the reformation of the empire and says that for this reason God has honored him with his attribute Al-Hamid, the praised one. Baha'u'llah says, God had adorned the throne of his cause with a just and equitable Sultan and exalted him with his name, the praised one, as a token of his grace and a sign of his mercy. In the estimation of Baha'u'llah, Sultan Abdul Hamid II was established upon the throne of fairness and reigns among his subjects with pure justice. He verily is in the estimation of the wronged one, the most virtuous, the most discerning and most generous of all rulers. And then Baha'u'llah continues, strengthen him with thy might and make him victorious with thy power, for thou seest him clinging to thee and holding fast unto thy luminous hand. Lastly, Baha'u'llah asks God to exalt Abdul Hamid's empire over the lands on earth and cause him to remember and speak of the cause of God and be steadfast in it at all times. Aid him with the visible and invisible hosts and protect his domains from the rebellious on earth. So overall, Baha'u'llah actually says that the real aim of the prophets of God in general is on the reformation of the world or the rehabilitation of the peoples of the earth. So Islah al-Alam, Islah is also the code word in that period in the Ottoman Empire for reform. And Baha'u'llah claims himself to be the life giver and world reformer in some of his writings. So despite the injustices of the Ottoman state, Baha'u'llah advised its representatives to exert themselves for the betterment of the situation of the people and the reformation of state affairs, and continuously lauded the good governance of Abdul Hamid. In fact, we have no record of an unjust treatment towards the Baha'is by Abdul Hamid II from 1876 until the passing of Baha'u'llah in 1892. Only afterwards and through the instigations of Abdul Baha's half-brother Mirza Muhammad Ali, Abdul Hamid became hostile and molested Abdul Baha. Abdul Baha himself, already in his father's lifetime, presented himself concerned with the political situation and discussed the political climate during the reform periods in the Ottoman Empire and Iran. Abdul Baha is reported to have said that the thoughts of the statesmen of the East were weak, their hearts devoid of desire for the progress of the nation, their ideas petty, selfish, local, and not general. They thought of their own interests rather than of those of the country. They think more of the advancements of their own interests than of those of the country. They are not far-seeing patriots, but inexperienced tyros. They sell the resources of their country if they think by so doing they can fill their own pockets. So this is just one of the views of Abdul Baha. Of course, he was not always critical of all the Ottoman statements. On the contrary, he also had very positive and good relations with some of the Ottoman officials. As in Baghdad, also in Edirne, in his 20s, Abdu'l Baha was widely known for his qualities and deep intellect. Ottoman officials, high and low, were his admirers. We learn from Baha'i sources. One of them was the governor of Edirne during Baha'u'llah's exiles there, Khurshid Pasha. And it is said that Khurshid Pasha consulted Abdu'l Baha about the future of the Ottoman Empire. And Abdu'l Baha tells him a story about a sick man who was given opium by the watchman that made the sick man sleep, contrary to the doctor's advice, and the sick man got worse. Abdu'l Baha then told the governor, "It is your watch time. You are not doing anything to improve the condition of the sick country. You are putting it to sleep by giving it narcotics. When you leave your position, what do you care whether the patient will live or die? You have had your night's sleep. Instead of watching the patient solicitously and pulling him through, you prefer your own rest and comfort." So this was, I think, already touched by Sasha Dehghani in his talks, The Secret of Divan Civilization. And I will not come to that today. Also, the Risale Siyasiye, which is also important details on politics, to the events during the October Revolt and the from roughly 1890-92. Caused by the tobacco monopoly given by Nasruddin Shah to Great Britain, infuriated the Iranian merchants, especially in Tehran. So Abdu'l Baha, the politics and society in Iran, and actually how ideally it should be approached. So Abdu'l Baha basically says that man-made laws are not enough to enable human progress, that divine law of religion is indispensable to educate the people, that the interference of religious leaders, especially the ignorant ones in political affairs, is dangerous. And we learned that Abdu'l Baha's treatise on politics was also presented to the Shah and distributed among the notables of Iran. In another tablet written during the Iranian constitutional revolution, Abdu'l Baha refers to his Risale Siyasiye and sums up the involvement of religious leaders and students in the fall of Sultan Abdul Aziz. He says that in Istanbul, in every corner and bazaar, their cry, "We want war," could be heard. After such a conflict during which religion was abused for political ends and much blood was shed, the Ottomans lost most of their domains in Rumelia and Anatolia, says Abdu'l Baha. And he goes on saying that despite his counsels and exhortations in the Risale Siyasiye, the ears were deaf and the eyes blind, and similar violent events occurred during the constitutional revolution in Iran. In a Turkish tablet about Ottoman and Iranian reform, and it's probably the only Turkish one, there is a direct reference by Abdu'l Baha to the Tanzimat, to the Ottoman reform period. He again talks about Iran's worsening conditions caused by ignorant ulama, Iran's need for reform after the model of the Ottomans, and Abdu'l Baha's emphasis is here on secular reforms, actually. And he says that the clerics should only be concerned with spiritual and ethical matters, and they should educate the people and guide their conduct, and not to interfere in the affairs of the government, as he says, not to oppose the just government, or to cause the kingdom and nation to be in a deplorable condition and drown the people in ignorance. So coming to the context of Abdu'l Baha with some of the Ottoman statesmen, we have again Mithat Pasha. As I said, he was removed from Istanbul and sent to Syria, which was a very difficult province. And it was kind of a punishment. And there he was from 1878 until 1880, the governor in general. And during an inspection tour in May 1880, Mithat Pasha came to Akka and inquired for a place to stay for a few days and to rest. And people told him that there's this Rezwan garden owned by Abbas Effendi, and they asked Abbas Effendi if Mithat Pasha could stay. And so Abbas Effendi said, was delighted, of course, and then said he can stay there. And we have memoir by Mirza Haydar Ali, Baha'i, who was in the company of Abdu'l Baha in Haifa. So according to this memoir, Mithat Pasha said, "For years I have longed to meet him, Abdu'l Baha. I have seen his utterances in Turkish that are beyond like or equal and eloquently testify to his vast knowledge. I have often heard many of the learned highly praising and extolling him." Later, when Mithat Pasha left, he invited Abdu'l Baha to Beirut. Beirut was the seat of the province of Syria at that time. And so Abdu'l Baha traveled to Beirut by, quote, the express invitation of one of the most brilliant statesmen of the Ottoman Empire, Mithat Pasha, the liberal reformer, who as Grand Vizier was instrumental in inducing the Sultan to grant a constitution to his people. And Shoghi Effendi says about this episode, "It was through the extraordinary warm reception accorded him during his visit to Beirut, through his contact with Mithat Pasha, a former Grand Vizier of Turkey, and through his constant association with officials, notables, and leading ecclesiastics, who in increasing number had besought his presence, that he had succeeded in raising the prestige of the cause he had championed to a level it had never previously attained." Here you see some publications, Ottoman publications, which is the photograph of Abdu'l Baha. Coming to the Young Turk period, as you know, Abdu'l Baha was, as a result of the Young Revolution, he was freed from incarceration in August 1908. He was not anymore a political prisoner as a result of the for all political prisoners. Often in his talks in the West, Abdu'l Baha praised the Committee of Union and Progress, which was the main committee of the Young Turks, for releasing him and for their efforts for freedom. Abdu'l Baha was stating his appreciation for his liberation before it was clear that the military wing of the CUP would take over and cause him trouble. Until recently, it was not known how and through whom Abdu'l Baha was freed from imprisonment. In the light of Turkish letters that he wrote after his release, we know that he had quietly developed contacts with the civilian parliamentarian wing of the Young Turk Circus in Istanbul and Salonika during the reign of Abdul Hamid II. In those letters, Abdu'l Baha praises the CUP and supports their goals. One of his contacts was this gentleman on the left, Mehmet Tahir Bey, who was a military man, a teacher, a mystic, and Ottoman writer, who had been at different military and administrative posts, including Salonika and Istanbul. He was the Young Turk delegate for the city of Bursa at the Ottoman Parliament from 1908 to 11, but later distanced himself from the militant Young Turk policies. Mehmet Tahir Bey was co-founder of the secret Ottoman Freedom Society in Salonika in 1906. In the same year, Mustafa Kemal, later to be known as Ataturk, also founded a secret organization called Fatherland and Freedom Society when stationed in Syria. He went to Salonika in 1906 to make contact with the like-minded Mehmet Tahir, who had been his teacher at the military school there. Both societies were integrated in 1907 into the Young Turk Committee, and it is possible that as a well-known reformist figure in the Middle East, Abdu'l Baha made contact with Tahir Bey through reform-minded officers such as the young Mustafa Kemal during his post in Syria. Certain is that Abdu'l Baha was in contact with Tahir Bey via a Baha'i in Istanbul by name of Ahmet Sheikh Effendi, and through an Ottoman official named Bedri Pasha. Ahmet Sheikh Effendi was a soap merchant from Crete. He is not mentioned in any Baha'i source, but appears in this photograph in Istanbul. And in one of the letters to Ahmed Sheikh Effendi, to be forwarded to Mehmet Tahir Bey, Abdu'l Baha expresses his hope to meet and talk with the personage from the exalted Committee of Union and Progress. Specifically, Mehmet Tahir Bey should visit him in Egypt. Abdu'l Baha then talks about the Young Turks as the destroyer of the edifice of tyranny and the source of life for Turkey and Iran. He wished that the righteous liberals of Iran may live long through the aid and grace of God. Because since the day on which liberty was proclaimed in Iran, says Abdu'l Baha, the Baha'is live overall with joy and peace. I ask God assistance and confirmation for the Committee of Union and Progress. As Abdu'l Baha, he continues in this letter, as he was in prison for 40 years under the tyrant Abdul Hamid. After the revolution, the Committee of Union and Progress took the chains and fetters from the neck of this destitute stranger and placed them around the neck of the tyrannical and bloodthirsty Abdul Hamid. In another letter to Mehmet Tahir Bey, Abdu'l Baha thanks the committee for its high-mindedness and justice in liberating him, and asks that through the revolution, the radiating light of the morn of liberty illumined the horizons of the country. Abdu'l Baha calls Romania, where the revolution started, the dayspring of the lights of freedom and the dawning place of the lights of truth. Now coming to Bedri Pasha, or Hassan Bedrettin Pasha. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So Bedri Pasha was a military commander, writer, and a translator from French, also a writer. He was involved as a young soldier in the deposition of Sultan Abdul Aziz, and later on exiled to Palestine and Syria as a colonel. After the Young Turk Revolution, Bedri was Governor General in the Albanian province of Ishkodra from 1909 until 1911. And Persian Baha'i sources mention Bedri Bey as being exiled to Akka, being the translator of Abdu'l Baha into French and the Baha'i. Dr. Habib Muayyad says Bedri Bey, who later became Bedri Pasha, was one of the prisoners of Akka, who was extremely bright and well educated. Frequently, he attained the presence of the master, and subsequently, he became a believer. And Yunus Khan Afrukhti, another physician of Abdu'l Baha, mentions that prominent people such as Bedri, humbled walkly behind him, bowed themselves before the shrine of Baha'u'llah and emulated Abdu'l Baha in kissing the threshold as they entered the shrine itself. In one of his talks in America, Abdu'l Baha says about Bedri Pasha, the cause of God has always appeared from the East, but it has been more effective in the West. Once Bedri Pasha said in an address, "Gentlemen, Westerners have taken everything from us, the sciences, the arts, and the laws they took from the East. Now we fear that they may wrest from us the cause of Baha'u'llah as well." Those were his words. But Baha'u'llah is neither of the East nor of the West, neither of the South nor of the North. An anecdote from a non-Baha'i source about Bedri Pasha, it says that he was the person with whom Abbas Effendi was most cordial and passed most of the time of the day in Akka and spoke Persian for hours with him. Bedri is described as being a benign and very intelligent man who was fluent in speaking and writing Arabic, Persian, and French, and having translated many operas from French into Turkish, in addition to being skilled in calligraphy that he used to write with his fingernails. There are about 30 Turkish letters of Abdu'l Baha to Bedri Pasha at the Baha'i World Center. Some have political content speaking about the Young Turks. In some letters, Abdu'l Baha also praises the exceptional administration of Bedri Pasha in Albania. He encourages Bedri Pasha to establish unity based on Baha'i core beliefs by abolishing division and enmity among the diverse people of the province. Abdu'l Baha furthermore says that it is crucial to deliver the people from ignorance and inertia and bring them into the civilized world. The means for this foremost achievement, says Abdu'l Baha, is the diffusion of knowledge and education, making it accessible to all, and so delivering the diverse sects from evils and foolish prejudices. Baha'u'llah also says that it was due to divine confirmation which Bedri Pasha received that the people and tribes of Ishkodra, who are the most fanatical in Albania, live in comfort and peace in the province. The province was different from other provinces as regards the perfect safety and peace in such a time of tumult and rebellion. Abdu'l Baha says that a practical and beneficial step for the security of the country would be the construction of roads everywhere in the mountainous province. You see Bedri Pasha with his military staff in Albania. Another Persian tablet about the Young Turks written in Alexandria during Abdu'l Baha's stay in 1910 to 11. He addresses the Committee of Union and Progress. And Abdu'l Baha here talks about the similarity between the ideals and goals of the Young Turks and those of the Baha'is. He says that both seek freedom, love liberty, hope for equality. Both are well-wishers of humanity and ready to sacrifice their lives to unite humanity. But, says Abdu'l Baha, the young Turkish goals are concerned with the physical world and are only for the Ottoman Empire. He says that the Baha'i goals are broader and for all of humanity. Just to quote from that tablet, you can read from left to right. So in that tablet, Abdu'l Baha says, the Committee of Union serves the unity of the Ottomans, the Baha'is serve the unity of mankind. The Committee of Union demands political unity, the Baha'is unity of the spirit and conscience. The Committee of Union destroyed the edifice of tyranny, the Baha'is eliminate the edifice of malevolence and hate. The Committee of Union loves justice, the Baha'is love fellowship. The Committee of Union serves the Ottoman domains, the Baha'is wish to serve the world of humanity. The Committee of Union gathers and unites the diverse Ottoman peoples, the Baha'is wish to bring about the unity of the diverse nations and races and love them. The Committee of Union wants the unity of outer reality, the Baha'is are ready to sacrifice their lives for the unity of inner reality. It follows that the aims of the Baha'is are identical with the aims of the liberals of the Committee of Union and Progress. But, says Abdu'l Baha, nevertheless, the scope of the aims of the Baha'is is broader. In that same tablet, Abdu'l Baha cautioned the young Turks not to rely on conventional politics. He says that however much human politics shows progress in the world, it is nothing compared to divine politics. Divine politics is the light of the physical world and an immeasurable mercy that encompasses all peoples and nations. Therefore, we need to follow divine politics, especially in this glorious century and this age of the progress of humanity, which is nothing but divine, in which nothing but divine politics leads to success. Now all the peoples of the East must be content and happy with this politics and delighted in the pervading influence of the teachings of Baha'u'llah in Europe and America. Lastly, Abdu'l Baha calls on the Baha'is to do all in their power to familiarize themselves with the benevolent aims of the young Turks of the Committee of Union and Progress and respond to its just endeavors by assisting it. When Abdu'l Baha visited Washington, D.C. in April 1912, in the first week of his travels in the United States, he was given a brilliant reception was given in his honor, at which many prominent members of Washington society met him. This occasion ranked as one of the highlights of the unforgettable mission he undertook in the service of his father's cause, according to Shoghi Effendi. Among the people of eminence who met Abdu'l Baha was Yusuf Ziya Pasha, the Ottoman ambassador to Washington. Some Baha'i sources say that as a goodwill gesture towards Turkey, the distinguished Iranian Baha'i Ali Quli Khan, who served as charge d'affaires of Iran in America and later in Istanbul, and his American wife Florence gave a luncheon and reception at the Iranian embassy in honor of Yusuf Ziya Pasha. Abdu'l Baha gave a talk, and the Pasha, being a fierce Muslim, is said to have been full of deep wonder and stated, "This is irrefutable, this is pure logic." A few days later, the Ottoman ambassador invited the illustrious Abdu'l Baha, the Khans and the group of Baha'is to dine at the Ottoman embassy. At the table, Ziya Pasha was beaming, according to a Baha'i source, and looked at his guest with tear-filled eyes. Abdu'l Baha gave a talk about the unity of the East and West. Ziya Pasha made an address and called Abdu'l Baha the unique one of the age, who had come to spread his glory and perfection amongst us. The reply of Abdu'l Baha was, "I'm not worthy of this." At the end of the meeting, Ziya Pasha said, "Truly he is a saint." Florence Khan further wrote that Ziya Pasha became really enamored of Abdu'l Baha and called upon him day after day and attended certain of his talks. So politically, for the Ottomans, the government in Istanbul, Abdu'l Baha's presence in the American capital was a sensitive political issue that could disturb the balance with Iran and Russia, they said. The government in Istanbul did not initially want the ambassador to be in contact with Abdu'l Baha. In his memorandum to Istanbul, Yusuf Ziya Pasha states that considering Abdu'l Baha's positive reception by eminent people in America, his constant praises of the CUP and that displayed justice and liberated him, and the gathering given in his honor by the Iranian embassy, at which he had been present, the Ottoman embassy could not be indifferent toward him. Therefore, Abdu'l Baha and some of his followers were honored with a dinner. Yusuf Ziya Pasha adds that this was received positively, and his followers wrote a letter to the young government, hoping that the Baha'is may be assistant to the CUP. And this letter, written by American Baha'is and accompanied by about 800 signatures of American Baha'is from different cities, different Baha'i communities. And this is the text, if I may read. I know I'm out of time, but just let me finish this, and then hopefully we will have some time for questions as well. So the Baha'is the American Baha'is wrote to the Young Turk Committee, "With the utmost thankfulness do we, the undersigned, submit this letter to the Committee of Union and Progress in order to express our heartfelt appreciation of the good work accomplished by that enlightened committee. The former despotic government of Turkey," referring to Sultan Abdul Hamid, "incarcerated Abbas Effendi in prison. But when the respective Committee of Union and Progress hoisted the banner of liberty and freedom, they established justice and gave succor and help to all the oppressed. Through their efforts, Abbas Effendi was liberated and is now traveling in these United States of America. His activities are directed toward international peace and the conciliation and unification of all mankind. We, the friends of Abbas Effendi, are in the greatest joy that he is free and able to travel in our land. And with profound gratitude do we offer our thanks to the respective Committee of Union and Progress for their service to humanity. It is our hope that we may be of assistance to the Committee of Union and Progress." And these are some of the signatures by American Baha'is. On the left, you see the signature of the first American Baha'i, Thornton Chase, or in the middle, you have Stanwood Cobb, also an early American Baha'i who was a teacher in Istanbul during the Young Turk Revolution, and so on. So there are about 800 signatures presented with this letter to the Young Turks in Istanbul. And the daughter of Ali Quli Khan, who was representing Iran in the States, she wrote later, "Whereas Iran and the Ottoman Empire persecuted the Baha'is in the early days, now they had paid homage to Abdu'l Baha. Both the Persian legation and the Turkish embassy, legally even in America, the countries themselves, opened their doors to the one-time prisoner. You remember too how much malevolence had been directed towards Baha'u'llah from the Persian embassy at Constantinople, which ultimately for a time was to be headed by Khan, a Baha'i. Again, the last member of the Qajar dynasty, that dynasty which had sent thousands of Baha'is to their death, would be hosted by Khan at the same embassy in Constantinople and would come to rely heavily on this follower of Baha'u'llah. But even despite all this positive reception initially by the Young Turks and this respect shown to him, the tides turned against Abdu'l Baha once more after the militant nationalists, the Young Turks, seized the foreign said with the coup d'etat by Enver Pasha, Dal Talat Pasha, and Jamal Pasha, who played themselves as the ruling dictatorial triumvirate. The euphoria over the liberty, equality, and brotherhood of the young Turks did last long. On the contrary, especially the rule of those three pashas proved to be more and bloodier than Sultan. The attitude of Jamal Pasha, military governor of the Ottoman troops in Syria, towards Abdu'l Baha was in contrast to the opinion of early and liberal Young Turk leaders. Whereas those approached Baha'i ideas positively, Jamal was a sworn enemy of Abdu'l Baha due to the false accusations made by Abdu'l Baha's half-brother Muhammad Ali and his followers. Believing the statements of Muhammad Ali and his allies among Ottoman officials, Jamal Pasha promised that on his return from the conquest of the Suez Canal, he would kill Abdu'l Baha by crucifying him or kill him by hanging or death by firing spot, according to the wish of Abbas Effendi. Abdu'l Baha stated that Jamal Pasha was a cruel, boisterous, impetuous, and barbarous man beyond any description. They constantly provoke him against us, never leaving him alone, ceaselessly sowing seeds of doubt. Later, when Jamal Pasha met Abdu'l Baha in Palestine, his anger subsided and he enjoyed the Baha'i leader's presence. A Baha'i source relates that Jamal Pasha, when he arrived at Akka, called Abdu'l Baha to his presence. The Pasha had heard his name through various reports. So I will quote from this Persian source. It says, Abdu'l Baha went to his military tent. Jamal Pasha greeted him, came close and invited the master to come sit near him. Then he immediately roared, "You are a religious mischief maker, and for this reason the government has exiled you." Later, Abdu'l Baha would relate, I realized that he was drunk and prideful to such a point that if a chain or a piece of metal was handed to him, he would tear it apart. Therefore, I thought that since he was a Turk, it was best for me to reply in such a way that would make him laugh and would also, of necessity, quiet him. I replied to him, there are two kinds of troublemakers, political and religious. Then, before the audience, I pointed to him and continued. Praise be to God that so far no harm has come from the political mischief makers. During the reign of Sultan Abdul Hamid, Jamal Pasha was known as a political troublemaker. So Abdu'l Baha continues, Inshallah, no harm will come from this religious chief maker. With that, Jamal Pasha burst into loud laughter and joyfully said, by God, you are right. Then Jamal Pasha asked Abdu'l Baha, what is the cause of the Ottoman Empire's weakness? Abdu'l Baha responded, the existence of conflicting religions. Jamal Pasha asked, what is the remedy? The master replied that the leaders of all religions and denominations existing within the Ottoman Empire and Islamic lands gather in Constantinople and after consultations agree on a single and unifying religion. Once more, Jamal Pasha said, by God, you're right. The Pasha's anger and enmity subsided, and he expressed a desire for a second meeting. He said, I am now proceeding to Egypt to conquer that region and to drive the enemy into the sea and the Suez Canal. After my return, I will take it to Constantinople. There I will gather the religious leaders and force them into unity and agreement in one religion. Here your station is not evident. After this positive encounter, Jamal Pasha's attitude towards Abdu'l Baha once again changed for the worse due to the further negative reports sent to him about Abdu'l Baha. He promised to crucify him when he returned victorious from his military campaigns in the Sinai, but his troops were defeated by the British army and this did not take place. At the beginning of World War I, Abdu'l Baha planned to take practical steps to intervene peacefully against belligerents. He intended to convene a gathering of leading Muslim and Christian leaders in Palestine, where he hoped to advise them to cooperate to avoid disorder and chaos in the region. Abdu'l Baha was prevented by opponents from doing so. Despite this, he was occupied with local affairs and took over the task of providing food for the people in the region, who suffered from the mismanagement of the Ottoman overlord. Thank you very much. I hope I can relax like this Turkish professor. And we'll close my screen. Thank you. I think it was a bit too long, but I hope it was interesting.
Thank you. Indeed, it was very interesting, and we would like to open it now for discussion. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand or use the chat or any other tool. Please. Yes, Bijan, please.
Well, first of all, thank you, Necati, for another very enlightening presentation.
Thank you, Bijan.
In your research, especially during the Young Turks period, did you come across any documents that show perhaps connections or relationships between any members of the Young Turks and the Persian reformers who were living in different parts of the Ottoman Empire, especially in Istanbul? You know, people like Malkan Khan and Mirza Agha Khan and others,
Right,
who were instrumental in also establishing reforms that led to the constitutional revolution in Persia. Of course, we shouldn't discount the teachings of the Bab and Baha'u'llah also, that played an absolutely critical role in that as well.
Would you like to answer that, Necati?
hello?
Yes.
Is it
Yours?
Bijan being? Okay, so I don't know. So you're asking about relations of Young Turks and Iran reformers. I know that they were the Young Turks were encouraging, I think, the Iranian reformers, and they were in contact with them definitely in Istanbul, and as you said, in the early like before the official Young Turk period in the 1890s, we have contacts of the Young Turk with Jamaluddin al-Afghani, for example, and as you said, Mirza Agha Khan Kermani and Ahmad Ruhi and so on, and also actually who was also active as an Iranian reformer was this Abul Hassan Mirza, this Qajar prince who was a Baha'i. He was also active, and he's mentioned in Ottoman sources as well, but not positively.
Yeah, I was intrigued by even the choice of the title of the secret society or Masonic society that Malkan Khan established as the House of Oblivion or Faramush Khane,
Yes,
which seemed to be a nice parallel with some of the secret societies that the Young Turks were establishing in the Ottoman Empire.
It was a trend, actually. It was a European thing. The European Masonic lodges actually were active in the Middle East, in Iran, in Egypt, in Istanbul, and established many lodges. And so, as a consequence, they actually from the Tanzimat period, and all the reformers, when you look at them, the young Ottomans and then the Young Turks were all Masons, Freemasonic. They belonged to Freemasonic lodges. And this doesn't, of course, mean that we have this negative attitude towards this secret Masonic organizations, but I think the ideas, they were similar, like to some Baha'i ideas, and I think that's the point where they also met, and the ideas resemble a little bit, of course, with different foundations.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? You raise your hand or write in the chat. Just start talking.
Any criticisms?
Criticisms, questions. Okay. Well, so I would like to thank you once again, Necati, for this this lecture and for the previous lecture as well.
Thank you very much.
And with this, we are actually concluding. Well, in 2 weeks we will conclude officially, but we now have our final guest having a lecture. Our next meeting will take place in 2 weeks' time, on Tuesday the 30th. And as mentioned by Tiffany earlier, it will be actually sort of a conclusion of the course. So obviously we are looking forward to seeing you all in there. That is all. Thank you all. Have a pleasant evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Goodbye.